your girl finally has her first volume of Sailor V. So that's what we're gonna do today. We are gonna talk through the first volume of Sailor V. There are 2 other volumes that I need to get my hands on, but I have been trying for so long to find her out in the wild to add to my other collection of the original Sailor Moon volumes. Yes, we finally have the first one, and she is thick. As you know on this channel, I am a huge fan of Sailor Moon, so let's go ahead and before we get into the story, talk about the background of Sailor V. And also how Sailor V was the one to kind of turn into Sailor Moon, who is like one of the most popular, well-known, beloved magical girls. Let's go ahead and get into the facts. And by the way, if you see me looking this way, I have my notes right over there on my tablet, so I'm going to be glancing this way. But as we know from the Sailor Moon series, the creator of Sailor Moon, Naoko Takeuchi, is also the creator of Sailor Venus. But Sailor Venus / Sailor V was actually not their first project. In 1991, they had a manga project called the Cherry Project, which I have never heard about, so I'm going to be looking into that one. You know I'm going to be looking into that one. But shortly after, she was offered the opportunity to create a short story manga series. So being a big fan of magical girls, she decided to work on the one-shot series of Sailor Venus, which obviously did not stay a one-shot as Sailor Venus turned into the global sensation of Sailor Moon. Later on, Toei Animation was the one to contact Takeuchi wanting to make this spin-off into an actual series. And so with some tinkering and not wanting it to be just about one character who can transform, but more so have a team of magical girls, Sailor Moon and her Sailor Guardians were then born. And to list out some dates for you, Codename Sailor V manga started on August 3rd, 1991, and Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon, the manga, started on December 28th, 1991, and last but not least, the anime of Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon debuted on March 7th, 1992. And this next paragraph I want to read from the Sailor V fandom wiki page because it's pretty interesting detailing how it got its start alongside Sailor Moon. The first chapter of Codename Sailor V manga was originally released in Run Run magazine in Japan on July 18, 1999. After this, it continued to be published in Run Run at the same time Sailor Moon was published in Nakayoshi and released its final chapter right after the final chapter of Sailor Moon in 2 parts, in the July of 1997 and November 1997 issues. We all know the one, the only, Sailor Moon. We know her as the pretty guardian in a sailor suit with golden hair and 2 twin buns and tails. We all know the daughter of the moon princess, Princess Serenity, Usagi Tsukino. We all know her to be the shining star of Sailor Moon. But did you know there was actually someone who came before her, a pretty guardian in a sailor suit before the Sailor Moon? Yeah. And she's actually a part of our Inner Senshi team. Today, we are going to be talking about Minako, or codename Sailor V. I can't believe it's taking me this long to talk about Sailor V on this channel, but we are diving into the first manga today of the Sailor V manga series. So, this one is definitely a draft of what Sailor Moon is. If you actually read the manga and you know about the original Sailor V series, this is kind of coming before Sailor Moon. It's almost like a draft of what we know Sailor Moon to be now, but featuring Minako instead of Usagi as our Sailor Guardian. But before hopping into Volume 1 of Sailor V, let's go ahead and talk about the differences between Sailor V and Sailor Venus. Now, we all know that Usagi is the main character of Sailor Moon, considering her name is Sailor Moon, and it's literally just about her. But she is a very different character from Minako. Yes, they share tendencies to be very childish at times, very silly, loving sweets and guys, and very goofy, not doing their homework, getting very bad grades. They are literally like twins, and it's almost kind of a perfect replication of how even the manga points out that Earth and the planet Venus are almost like twins, as they're roughly the same size. And of course, we know that Usagi is the Moon Princess, Princess Serenity, so it would make more sense if the Moon and Venus were twins, but you have to kind of understand, Usagi loves the Earth, that's why she protects the Earth. So I think in this situation, we could say that Usagi is like the Earth and Minako is like Venus. Whereas Usagi is much more of a crybaby, Venus does not cry, and it's even mentioned in the first couple pages of the Sailor V manga that the boys want to see the headstrong, hot-headed Minako cry, but she refuses to cry. There's already a huge distinction of character there. And we even see it in the manga and the new Sailor Moon Crystal animes, where we see that Minako comes in headstrong as Sailor Venus, who says, "I am the Moon Princess. I am the one that you are meant to protect." Now, she does this to kind of try to throw off the enemy and find the real Moon Princess, who is Usagi, but Sailor Venus has a very high-ranking role among the Sailor Scouts, as she is the one who is almost like the right hand of Sailor Moon. She proclaims that she's the princess, taking over Usagi's role without her even really knowing that was her role, to simply protect her and try to throw off the villains, because at this point they don't quite know it is Usagi, but let's be real, we all know it's Usagi as viewers. Minako is also a very important character, as she has a cat just like Luna. When we're introduced to Usagi as Sailor Moon, she gets her powers from the cat Luna, who gives her a compact and tells her the magic words to transform into the pretty guardian Sailor Moon, which is the exact same thing that we see with Sailor V in her first debut. Now in Minako's case, she is also given a compact, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, and she is given this compact by Artemis, the white cat, who lets her transform into Sailor V, and it's basically the same story. Now, a lot of this is just in reference that Sailor V was created before Sailor Moon, so it's kind of like a tie-in. It would make sense because in their own right, they were both the heroines of their stories, but I still do think that this gives Sailor Venus a much bigger importance to the story than I think a lot of people really understand. She was the first, and without her, we would not have Sailor Moon and her miracle romance. So let's go ahead and dive in to the story of Sailor V. Minako Ayano is a typical middle school girl. She just got into middle school and she is super flexible. She's great at activities and anything that requires exercise. She is fantastic at doing stunts, and she accidentally misses her stunt because of a wandering white cat who kind of gets her in trouble with the teacher, as she's kind of going above and beyond what they wanted her to do in gym class. But Minako has a huge crush on the popular boy Higurashi-san. Higurashi is a very attractive boy who all the girls love and who all the guys want to be like. It is then revealed that Higurashi is actually someone who is a villain. Now, I will say that so far in the first half of the manga, the villains aren't really laid out and showcased about what they are or what their goals are, kind of like they are in Sailor Moon. And again, a lot of this is just because it is the draft of Sailor Moon. Now, Artemis, the white cat, has already kind of been scouting out Minako, thinking maybe she's the one. Do I give her this compact? Do I let her transform? Is she the one? Now, it isn't said who it is in the first half of the manga, but there is someone that Artemis keeps calling boss, and the boss says, yes, this is the girl. Give her the compact and tell her the magic words to transform. And so Artemis finds her and gives her this moon-shaped compact. Now, this compact is more of a crescent moon and is very beautiful and bejeweled, and when you open it, it kind of resembles a full moon. She says the magic words, moon power, transform, which is very similar to Usagi's moon crystal power, make up, or Venus's Venus crystal power, make up. She transforms by saying, I am the guardian of justice, the beautiful guardian in a sailor suit. Sailor Venus has arrived. Codename Sailor V. Now, first and foremost, Sailor Venus has a very different design than Sailor Moon. One thing that is very similar is they have the glasses. These glasses, sadly, are not carried over in the majority of the anime. I do think it was teased a little bit in the Sailor Crystal anime, but these glasses were super, super important and almost even acted as like a superhero mask. We see her sporting her signature golden locks pulled back into a half ponytail supported by a red bow, but the Sailor uniform is much different than what we see in the Sailor Moon series. We still have a similar fashion, as we still have the skirt and we have the same collar and also the bow, and we even have the same underboob lining, and also, we do see heels. A lot of characters wear heels, where a lot of characters also wear boots, but it is so cool that Mina is still wearing her typical heel shape, just in more of a navy blue. And the costume doesn't necessarily have a color scheme like we know in the Sailor Moon universe, but for this costume, we see that she has a yellow stripe on her gloves. We also see that the colors for the collar are red and blue. We see a lot of red, white, and blue influence in this costume. Using the power of the crescent beam, she then shouts "Crescent Beam!" and then defeats Higurashi, who had turned into a monster. Now, this was really upsetting to her, but Artemis has to become her companion, and so together the two then become great friends after he comforts her after her first night as a superhero. Artemis also shows her who she is as a Sailor Guardian. He kind of transports her out into space where they overlook both Earth and Venus, which, as I mentioned earlier, are noted to be twin planets because of their very similar sizes. And much like we know about the Sailor Guardians or even Sailor Princesses in Sailor Moon, everyone has a castle. We know that the Sailor Guardians are princesses and they all have their own castle that they defend. While Usagi as Serenity has the Silver Millennium Castle, everyone else still has a castle, as we see with their princess forms and their princess dresses. This idea was absolutely carried over and expanded upon from Sailor V into Sailor Moon. The first half of the manga really showcases how she is getting used to using her powers, as one, she's also able to transform in ways like Usagi does for disguises. We see many times in the Sailor Moon series where Usagi transforms into a different person wearing a different outfit, whether that be a different hair color or a different outfit to get in and kind of squeeze by without being recognized as Usagi Tsukino. She transforms and has all kinds of beautiful outfits. This was also something that was first shown in Sailor V, as Sailor V also disguises herself and in one panel looks exactly like Usagi, like kind of uncanny. And I will say another thing that I really, really love is that Sailor V keeps that creepiness from the original Sailor Moon series. All of the enemies are very creepy. We still see these creepy drawings, these creepy faces, and I absolutely love that. Before we get more into the second half of the first volume, I will say there are some characters that look very, very similar to characters that we know and love in Sailor Moon. Now, first and foremost, we have the Superintendent General of the police force, who definitely looks like a mixture of Rei and Setsuna. Setsuna definitely with the style, but Rei definitely with the hair and the face. She is super eccentric and a huge fan of Sailor V. Even as a working high-ranking officer of the police force, she is rooting for Sailor V, but rooting for her in a way because she still wants Sailor V on their side, whereas other members of the police force do not like that Sailor V has taken on the role of vigilante. We also have a side character called Amano, who looks very similar to Umino. We also see Hikaru-chan. She is the best friend of Minako since grade school and looks surprisingly a lot like Ami with her short hair and earrings. Now, I do find it kind of strange that it never makes any notion of Hikaru even in the Sailor Moon universe, I think it would be really cool to still see some of these characters because the school that Minako goes to looks an awfully lot like the one that Usagi goes to. Another thing that I'm really loving about this manga series is how it really ties in what we know from Minako's aspirations in the Sailor Moonverse. We know that Minako loves idols. We also see her family, which, by the way, her mom and her dad look an awfully lot like Sailor Moon Usagi's parents too, and even kind of has the same dynamic. But it does seem that she's always wanting to look at TV, she's always obsessed with idols, and two of the big villains for the first half of this manga series are two sisters who are idols. Now, the older sister obviously gets taken out by Sailor V, and so codename Sailor V has to go and then defeat the younger sister who is also trying to take her out. Now, the second part of this manga is when it truly starts to get really fascinating and very reminiscent of what we know in Sailor Moon, as we start to see a main villain behind the scenes named Danburite. Danburite? Put that pronunciation in there, Em.
Danburite.
This is a shadowy figure of a man who is the one calling to action the bad villains of the series. Now, the big one that we see with a name very reminiscent of Sailor Moon is Fluorite. Fluorite also tells us that Pandora and Petite Pandora are also a part of the same task that she is. They are both villains under this new villain's rule. And we finally get to see what their goal is, which is, and I quote, "We will drain vast quantities of energy from the humans and destroy their entire race. Then all of Japan, no, the entire Earth, will be ours to command." We also see, just like in later episodes of Sailor Moon, that the arcade holds a very symbolic reason for everyone continuously coming and hanging out here, which is that the underground part of the arcade is actually the lair/hideout, techie hideout if I might add, of the Sailor Guardians. And now, this is where I do have to break away a little bit from the manga because the boss is never quite told, to us at least, the viewer, who their true identity is. Minako asks, "I would love to know who you really are. What is your identity?" And the boss says, "I can't tell you that just yet." But upon looking through what a lot of fans think, a lot of fans are speculating that the boss might actually be Queen Serenity. As we know, Queen Serenity has a digitalized consciousness that she sometimes can use via the computer system under the arcade to speak with her daughter Serenity, or now Usagi Tsukino. We also know that Queen Serenity was the one who awakened Artemis and Luna in the first place and sent them on their missions to find and awaken the Sailor Scouts. But this is never confirmed. This is only a fan speculation of the spirit of Queen Serenity, as it's the only one who really makes sense, as it doesn't feel like it would be Luna. Luna is not even created or mentioned in this series, and so it would make sense that the person who awakens the cats would be the one to kind of guide them on their journey of awakening the first Sailor Guardian. But the boss does tell us more about the enemies, which is, all of this is a conspiracy concocted by an organization known as the Dark Agency. Dark Agency are also the ones who are pretending to be idols to drain energy from the humans. Their plot is to drain people of their energy, eventually to wipe out all of mankind and take over the earth. Every enemy you fought so far was one of their agents. And another fun little tidbit of trivia is that Furuhata Motoki is still the same quote-unquote Sailor Moon arcade guy that we know and love from the original series, and is still the guy that Minako has a crush on, and also later becomes a good friend of Mamoru Chiba, and also a guy that Usagi and many of the other Sailor Scouts have a crush on. Now, interestingly, there is also a character later on in the second half of the Sailor V Volume 1 manga that looks a lot like Kunzite. Now, there is a mention of someone named Kuzite-sama, but we don't actually really see them in this first volume. Now, we could probably just chalk this up to the fact that Sailor Moon and Sailor V were kind of written within the same period of time. Sailor V, very obviously, being the beginning of what we now know Sailor Moon to be, it could also have been used as a trial for fleshing out the story. And so I do think that is a good reason as to why we definitely are seeing a lot of familiar faces within Sailor V that look like characters in Sailor Moon, but aren't quite the characters in Sailor Moon. And I do think this character that we see, Saito-san, is a good reference for that, as he looks a lot like Kunzite. Kunzite if he wore Earth fashion, namely Mamoru Chiba fashion, because we literally see this fashion in the Sailor Moon Crystal series, where Mamoru is wearing a dress shirt and then suspenders and black pants. Now, again, this character is not the Kunzite that we know, but he looks a lot like Kunzite. But this is Saito, and basically he's just a character who Minako really feels bad for because he's a little bit of a gangster. He's fallen into a lot of gang fights, and he's not going to graduate if he keeps getting into fights. But Minako needs his help in a battle, and so she transforms herself into a teacher that he's fallen in love with. And he literally believes that she is the teacher, even kisses her. She definitely did not expect that, nor does she expect for him to turn out as hot as he has now become. And for the last character I want to briefly mention, I'm only going to mention this character very lightly because they don't really appear in the first volume, but if I do make more videos talking through the other series, maybe we'll do more deep dives, but if I don't, I still want to mention this character because they are the quote-unquote big bad slash almost love interest for Sailor V, which is Dambarite, the villain of the story, who also goes by Adonis, who, if you don't know, in Greek mythology was the human lover of Venus. Gotta love those Greek tie-ins. But he also uses the Ace Kaito alias when he is performing as an idol. Now, he is very proactive. He also takes to the stage like all of the Dark Agency members under him, and he is actively also trying to bring chaos to the world. Gotta love it, gotta love it. But he is definitely giving me Mamoru Chiba Tuxedo Mask vibes. So, And while I do think he does resemble and maybe is supposed to act like a trial Mamoru Chiba, I just can't help but think that he looks a lot like Helios. Like, am I crazy for that? Now, Dambarite is a very important character as well as the entire Dark Agency because they are almost like a little sub-unit of the Dark Kingdom, which is run by General Kunzite, who we know in the Sailor Moon series, who is then under the influence of the evil Queen Beryl. So it's definitely starting to tie in with all of the characters to the main Sailor Moon plots. Now, this next section comes again from the Sailor V / Sailor Moon wiki, and I think it's pretty important to include, so I'm going to read it out for you guys. According to Dambarite, back during the Silver Millennium, he was Adonis, a foot soldier posted to Venus, and was later assigned to fight under Prince Endymion during the rise of Queen Metalia. While on Earth, he saw Princess Venus for the first time and fell in love with her, but his love went unrequited. She discovers his identity during a joint Japanese-Chinese movie called The Chinese Princess Story. Upon his death at the hands of Sailor V, he predicts that her love will be doomed for all eternity, knowing she will always choose duty over love, but at the same time leaving her path open to put her mission before romance without hesitation. It's because of him that Minako learns of the existence of the Dark Kingdom and joins the Sailor Guardians. His death also marks the end of the Dark Agency. But that is the first recap of Volume 1 of Sailor V. Let me know if you would like to do another recap video with me where I talk about the other volumes when I get my hands on them as well. Let me know that in the comments. But I really do think that as a Sailor Moon fan, I constantly see people who would love to see a different Sailor Moon series, maybe set in the future based off of Chibi-Usa and her Sailor Scouts. But I also think a large percentage of the fandom would love to see Sailor V get her own anime. There is just so much content that we could definitely milk from Sailor Moon because, I mean, come on. the originality is there. Like, she is so popular. They could have absolutely milked Sailor Moon for what she is worth, and I'm really kind of surprised that they haven't, but I genuinely would love to see Sailor V come to the animated screen. I think it would be so fun to see what Minako was like before taking on the role of Sailor Venus in animated format. I've been trying to get my hands on this series for a while, so as a Sailor Moon fan, as a Moonie, I might be a little bit late on this, but oh my goodness, it is so nice going back and seeing the origin of Sailor Moon. You can definitely tell that a lot of ideas were, one, scrapped, and also were expounded upon within the Sailor V to Sailor Moon universes, which are the same universes, I should clarify that. This was an absolute phenomenal read. It gave me that same feeling of the first season of Sailor Moon, where everything is fun and whimsical, and you're just so excited to sit down and read and watch more of it. I absolutely love this to pieces, but let me know down below in the comments how you feel about Codename Sailor V, and let me know if you would like to see an anime version. Maybe one day we can hope and we can pray to the moon, Sailor Moon herself, but regardless, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!